Today is Tuesday, April 7th, 2020, and today we're going to be discussing pretty much the, 2020 presidential election. So, just to start off, I'm using politicalpolls.jhkforecast.com. Essentially, you can just go to jhkforecast.com, and it'll show you their 2020 presidential election forecast. This is just a quick update as to why this part of the beginning of the video. The reason why I state that Joe Biden is the more electable candidate based off the numbers alone, just take a look at this electoral map number. Essentially, this takes all of the polling data compiled, and I know a lot of you guys may not be too trusting in polling data, but it was pretty accurate in 2018. If you take a look at the actual polls and not what the mainstream media pushed, there's a huge difference between those two. And in the 2018 midterms, they were almost spot on. But taking a look at the overall polls, statewide, Joe Biden gets 351 electoral votes, whereas Bernie Sanders would only get 283. So based off the numbers alone, technically, Joe Biden is the more electable nominee, and honestly, I think with a more centrist platform, though it didn't win in 2016, there are a whole number of factors that impacted Hillary Clinton's campaign. Joe Biden is vastly more approved of than Hillary Clinton is heading into this election. But just taking a look, obviously Bernie Sanders would still win the election according to this, based off polling data, but this is a more, general comparison based off polling data itself. But that's besides the point of making this video. Today we're going to be discussing the first ever presidential forecast that I have made on this channel. Now I know I make a lot of predictions, but I never actually have the full-on presidential election forecast, similar to one that you might have seen into the 2016 presidential election. Typically, Nate Silver and 538 put one together, shoot it out after the primary, and then obviously that's when it would be utilized. Joe Biden is not the nominee right now. He's considered the presumptive nominee by the mainstream media and a lot of Democratic primary voters, but it's technically still not over. But in terms of the presidential forecast, pretty much Americans have set on Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, and this forecast accounts for a lot of things that have changed from now till then. This is more of the, if the election was held today, this is more of when the election will be held in November, what can change and in which direction it'll go. But here's what's surprising. So, taking a look at this map, technically, based off of the, vote shared right now, Joe Biden would lose this presidential election as we continue on. And the reason being is the fact that the state of Wisconsin has moved over to the GOP. Now, the state of Wisconsin gives Donald Trump a 50.8% chance and Joe Biden with a 49.3% chance. The projected vote is expected to be insanely close the same way it was before. There was a point in time where Trump had a much larger expected win, but it looks like we're still setting on the fact that Donald Trump is expected to win the state of Wisconsin according to this presidential forecast. So what would an electoral map look like based off these numbers? Well, first of all, this actually looks very similar to the 538 one, surprisingly. But Pennsylvania and Michigan, these are two states that went for Donald Trump in 2016. So these states go to the Democrats. Pennsylvania, less so than Michigan, but Pennsylvania with a 56% non-vote margin chance that Joe Biden wins here. As for Michigan, it goes up a lot higher to 64% chance. And while the 538 forecast may have been off in 2016, if you take a look at it, that did not account for that silent majority that actually came out and voted in the presidential election. I can guarantee it, these forecasts are taking them into account. They did in the 2018 midterms, and they ended up accurately predicting, not this website in particular, but 538, ended up taking that into account and accurately predicting very close to what were the actual expected Senate margins and House margins. But taking a look at other areas that Joe Biden actually isn't doing as bad as I thought he would, states like Florida. All the states, by the way, that are red or likely red are obviously just safe states for Donald Trump. Texas, 13% chance, 14% chance that the Democrats win there. Obviously not a large thing. The reason why Iowa and Ohio and Georgia are always either lean or likely Republican in my videos because they have about a 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 chance, the Democrats being they, have a 1 in 4 chance of winning either of these states, any three of these states, and probably, 1 in 8 chance in the state of Texas. But just taking a look at overall where obviously it looks like it's going to come down to. The Rust Belt is always just an area that the Democrats have underperformed in 2016, and it looks like they're regaining momentum based off the midterm elections, but if 2010 told us anything, midterm elections are not the exact predicted outcome that in the general election. But North Carolina and Florida are two states that are insanely close. I agree that North Carolina might actually be less Democrat than Florida, but they're about the same in this polling data numbers. Obviously, if the polls hold, that would be the expected prediction margin, but once we actually hit Election Day, I generally do believe that both Florida and North Carolina will go to Donald Trump just because of their Republican past, and also the Democrats didn't exactly have the most stellar performance in either of these two states during the midterm elections. But we do have an interesting governor and Senate election coming up in North Carolina, so that should be pretty interesting. But the Democrats definitely should target North Carolina and Florida. I think Georgia is like a pipe dream for them. Yes, it seems crazy that Georgia is competitive, but it's not so much realistic. For Ohio and Iowa, I think that these numbers actually might change over time. At some point in time, I guess the margin was closer. It was, let's see, 32% chance that Joe Biden would have won the state of Iowa, but honestly, not super important to the Democrats' victory. So these are tipping points. I don't know why I tried to click that. So the states that are going to end up making or breaking the election, Colorado is pretty much a done deal for the Democrats. 83% chance. If I had an 83% chance of winning an election, I'd be winning a state. I'd be almost certain that I was winning it. In Nevada, 66% chance. Similar. Actually, not similar to any of these Republican states, but Colorado is definitely similar to Iowa and Ohio and Georgia. So as much of these states are red, this state is blue, but I definitely think that Colorado is going to be Democrat, even if Iowa and Ohio and Georgia maybe even more solidly Republican. As for Nevada, this one is a 66% chance. Not much to worry about. It's not even considered a tipping state, but definitely Arizona. Arizona is definitely a target for a number of these I guess, Democrats. Number one, they have a Senate election there. They still have to hold on to their House majority in Arizona. And this presidential election, though this forecast gives Joe Biden a 40% chance at winning in the state of Arizona, generally believe that it's higher than that. But this is definitely just based on the compilation of NBA player makes it 3. Based off of, I guess, just polling data, the overall margin is Trump plus 1.9, so definitely should be. But a lot of the, well, this is the projected vote. Polling average still shows Trump ahead by 0.1, but the overall expected margin is supposed to be Trump plus 1.9. A lot of these recent polls definitely show Biden ahead, so something definitely changed before when Biden wasn't exactly the presumptive nominee. And, you know, so Arizona, definitely one of them. Minnesota, surprisingly, honestly, I think that Minnesota might actually be pretty close. A 5.6% margin is nothing to laugh at for Democrats. Minnesota was a 2% margin in 2016, so definitely an area that the Republicans may focus on, but generally I do not think that Minnesota is going to go to the Democrats, to the Republicans. This is a state that had a strong showing for Democrats in special elections, in the Senate election, expected to do well in the Senate election coming up. Polling data checks out. 2016 went for Hillary Clinton, so no real reason as to why Minnesota would go to Donald Trump. But looking over Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, I mean, just taking a look at Pennsylvania, it's still pretty close. The expected vote margin is Biden plus 1.1, so honestly, not exactly the best margin for Biden, but a lot of the recent data actually may be showing Trump ahead. Going over to the state of Michigan, I don't. The 538. Sorry, this polling data might be a little bit different than what you might see in Real Clear Politics. This one typically takes into account to every single poll that's done in these states, whereas Real Clear Politics sort of feeds them out and doesn't really trust certain pollsters. But the polling average is plus 2.9, so Michigan is definitely the most Democratic out of all of the states, and that's also pretty consistent with what I've been making in some of my videos, where Michigan may be likely Dem, whereas Pennsylvania and Wisconsin may be lean Dem, or sometimes I'll associate Michigan and Pennsylvania together, as this forecast is doing as well, whereas Wisconsin may go to the GOP. And honestly, taking a look at data, Trump leads by 0.4% in terms of polling data. He doesn't do that on Real Clear Politics, so again, still depends on what they say. They take in online polls on here. Definitely a lot of polls that Real Clear Politics does not take into account. State similarity, plus 1.1 essentially, well, based off what I've seen. Yeah, I guess it's more Democratic than the national average. Not so sure. Expert ratings show Biden ahead plus 0.3, but the overall average is Trump plus 0.2. Very, very close. At one point in time, Biden was expected to win, but the projected vote has always been within a percentage point. So if it was a Biden victory, it was a narrow one. Based off this electoral map, Joe Biden would lose the presidential election because of Wisconsin. I'm thinking the numbers are, well, if you take, I guess, Wisconsin and give it to them, it would be 270 to 268 at this point. Because of Trump won Michigan and Pennsylvania, it would go 16 and 20. That's assuming that Trump does win Maine's 2nd district. I don't know if they have a... Okay, so Maine's 2 electoral votes, so this is a nationwide thing. Don't know if they have the congressional districts. Maybe they do on the side. No, they don't. But the average electoral votes is 288.7 to 249.3. but not really seeing where they're exactly pulling that from, because the Democrats need to win all 3 of these to win the election, but if they win Wisconsin, that's 278 to 260. It still would take in Arizona into account, but the average number of electoral votes, I'm assuming, is just speculation. But there's no third-party candidate, so winning the White House, Biden definitely had a stronger showing before. Trump has definitely taken a hit on that. In terms of the popular vote, Biden was always going to win the popular vote. Generally think that's how it's going to actually end up, regardless of who wins the actual election or not. But the race is 270. So yeah, so it was 270 to 268 based off the numbers that are presented on that map right now. Still very narrow thing. I mean, if there's any faithless electors, definitely not going to be a good sign for either of these 2 candidates. Imagine if it doesn't actually go through. The stakes would be insanely high if it was 270 to 268. But here you can pretty much see the focus. So actually, Maine's 2nd district, surprisingly, Trump has a plus 6 point Maine 2nd. So it looks like Donald Trump is still expected to carry Maine 2nd district, definitely by a narrower margin than in the 2016 election, but still expected to go as well. Just taking a look, so the way that this is, I guess, made is that the larger the circle, the more weight it has on the presidential level. So California has the most electoral votes, 55, compared to South Dakota, which only has 3, so obviously the circle's smaller, and then the chance of each candidate winning the state, but Wisconsin is narrow for Donald Trump. So the tipping point is saying which state will actually come back down and see who will win in the 270 electoral votes needed. So it looks like a 1 in 4 chance that Florida comes down to it. Right now, I give that one to Donald Trump. Donald Trump gets that one according to this. 15% chance it goes to Pennsylvania, then a 12% to North Carolina, 11% for Michigan, and the rest are less than 10%. And just taking a look at this polling data, obviously a lot for the Democrats to improve on based off this data. If they hold these numbers on election day, definitely going to look a lot better, but it looks like Trump may be narrowing down Biden's current 351 electoral vote number down to 268, a losing number. But it would be pretty interesting if Biden ended up carrying that 351. I actually haven't seen this before, so I actually just want to see the simulation. So it ends up with Trump 275 and Democrats 262. This is such a weird thing. Wow. But okay, that's cool. I'm definitely going to check this out on my own. So if you guys want to go ahead and check this out for yourselves, it is projects, I guess, or projection. Projects.jhkforecast.com/presidential-forecast. Honestly, just go to the jhkforecast.com and then you can go ahead and find which ones that you want to do. They have a Senate forecast, they have a Democratic primary forecast, not too important. They explain it, and of course their forecast. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.